At 4:47 inches the morning, Claire Bennett was standing between a dead man and the person who had killed him. At least, everyone in the Bellini mansion believed Dante Bellini was dead. His private surgeon had signed the declaration 4 hours earlier. His captains were already downstairs deciding which businesses required immediate protection. Armed men had abandoned their posts to gather in whispered clusters beneath crystal chandeliers. Black SUVs idled beyond the iron gates while messages traveled through Chicago faster than the dawn. Dante Bellini was dead, and when a mafia boss died, grief lasted exactly as long as power remained unclaimed. Claire stood beside the medical bed with both hands wrapped around Dante's icy fingers. Behind her, the door opened. Marco Santoro entered, wearing the same black suit he had worn when Dante had been carried into the mansion bleeding. His expression changed the instant he saw Claire. Not much. Only enough. You're still here? Claire looked at him. Marco glanced toward Dante's body beneath the blankets, then toward the medical equipment. The portable monitor beside the bed had been turned away from the doorway. Marco didn't know what Claire knew. He didn't know that 23 minutes earlier, a second physician had pressed 2 fingers against Dante Bellini's throat and whispered words Claire could still barely believe. There is a pulse. Weak. Impossible. But there. Marco stepped farther into the room. We're moving him downstairs. Claire didn't move. No. Marco's eyes hardened. It was the first time in 2 years she had ever told a Bellini officer no. Excuse me? He stays here. Marco stared at the woman everyone in this mansion forgot existed. Then something happened beneath Claire's hand. Dante's fingers tightened. Weakly. Deliberately. Claire's breath stopped. Behind her, Marco's hand slipped inside his jacket, and Dante Bellini opened his eyes. 14 hours earlier, Claire's life had still been ordinary. Or as ordinary as life could be when your employer controlled half the city's illegal gambling rooms and required armed guards to accompany the gardener whenever he trimmed hedges near the east wall. Claire had learned to survive Bellini Mansion by mastering invisibility. She polished silver, managed laundry, prepared guest rooms, memorized who took coffee black and who became unpleasant when the wrong whiskey appeared after dinner. She knew which floorboards creaked, which guards secretly smoked behind the conservatory, and which lieutenants never looked servants in the eye. For 2 years, she had existed around men who carried guns as casually as other men carried phones. Most never learned her last name. Dante Bellini had. That was the problem. Months earlier, Claire had entered a restricted study after smelling burning insulation. She had found sparks crawling behind an antique wall panel near overloaded electrical wiring. She pulled the emergency breaker before flames could reach the century-old wooden structure. When Dante's lieutenant, Victor Coletti, discovered her inside the restricted room, he humiliated her in front of 6 guards. A maid doesn't need curiosity. Claire had swallowed the embarrassment. Then Dante appeared. He didn't raise his voice. He almost never did. He simply asked, "Why was she inside?" Victor answered for her. She was snooping. Dante looked at Claire. She remembered those eyes. Dark. Steady. Terrifying because they never needed anger to become dangerous. Claire? It had startled her that he knew her name. "I smelled smoke, sir." Dante inspected the damaged wiring himself. Then he turned to Victor. "Apologize." Victor laughed. Nobody else did. Dante's expression didn't change. "I said apologize." Victor's face drained. He apologized. Dante looked at Claire once more. "You protected my home. I was doing my job." "No." His chazad lingered on her. "You did more than your job." After that evening, something shifted. Not romance. Claire wasn't foolish enough to mistake basic human decency from a dangerous man for affection, but she began noticing Dante. Not the legend everyone feared. The man. He left his office at 2 in the morning with exhaustion buried behind perfect control. He phoned his widowed aunt every Sunday. He remembered that the oldest groundskeeper's granddaughter had surgery and sent a specialist without allowing anyone to say where the money came from. He could order a man's death before dinner and then stand silently in the kitchen doorway making sure the cook who had fainted from dehydration received medical attention. Contradictions made people dangerous. They also made them human. Claire understood too late that loyalty had begun growing in the space between those contradictions. Then, on a stormy November night, the mansion gates opened at 9:38 p.m. 3 black SUVs came through at speed. The first had bullet holes through the windshield. Claire was carrying folded linens across the upper hall when men began shouting downstairs. She reached the landing just as Dante was brought through the entrance. Blood covered his white shirt. His head hung against one guard's shoulder. His usually controlled face was colorless. "Medical room," someone shouted. Claire froze. Marco Santoro followed them inside. There was blood across Marco's cuff. "The meeting was compromised," he said. They knew the route. Dante's head moved faintly. His eyes opened, only for a second. Through the confusion, his gaze lifted. Found Claire, and stopped. She didn't know whether he actually recognized her. Then his eyes closed. The doors to the private medical wing slammed shut. For 3 hours, Claire heard nothing except footsteps and muffled orders. The Bellini mansion contained a surgical suite because men like Dante couldn't always enter public hospitals without police questions following. Dr. Elias Monroe had worked for the family for 12 years. Shortly after midnight, he came through the doors covered in blood. Marco stood first. "Well?" Monroe removed his glasses. "I couldn't save him." The hallway became still. Claire was standing near the wall with fresh towels no one needed anymore. Marco said, "Time, 12:16 a.m. One of the guards cursed under his breath. Another crossed himself. Claire looked toward the closed medical room doors. Something inside her refused to accept the sentence. Not because Dante Bellini was invincible. Men like him only pretended to be. But she had seen him alive 3 hours earlier. She had seen his eyes find hers. Now strangers were discussing his death like a schedule change. Marco began issuing commands immediately. "Lock external accounts. Contact Naples. I want every captain downstairs in 20 minutes. One guard hesitated. "What about Mr. Bellini?" Marco barely looked toward the door. "The doctor declared him dead." Those words changed the mansion. Within minutes, everyone left Dante. Everyone except Claire. At 12:43 a.m., she entered the medical suite. The room was freezing. Dante lay beneath a white sheet. The blood had been cleaned from his body. Without the tailored suits, the armed men, the reputation, he looked younger. Not harmless. Never that. But mortal. Claire pulled a chair beside him. "This is ridiculous," she whispered. Her voice broke. "You probably terrified half this city, and this is how they leave you." Silence. She looked down at his hand. There were scars across his knuckles. She remembered those same hands signing Christmas bonuses for staff members who didn't know where the money came from. Claire slipped her fingers around his. Cold. She began crying quietly. Not dramatically. There was no audience. "You shouldn't have made Victor apologize," she whispered. A tear slid onto the sheet. "If you'd ignored me like everyone else, I could ignore you now." She stayed. 1 hour became 2. Downstairs, men argued over territory. Phones rang. New alliances were already forming. At 2:57 a.m., Claire realized Dante's hand didn't feel as cold as before. She frowned. She pressed her thumb against his fingers. Maybe the blankets had retained warmth. She should leave. Then, his index finger moved. Claire stopped breathing. "Don't you?" "Nothing." She leaned closer. His fingers twitched again, then closed weakly around hers. Claire shot upright so quickly the chair hit the floor. "Oh my God." She ran into the hallway. Most guards had gone downstairs. One younger man remained near the elevator. "Get the doctor." He stared at her. Dr. Monroe left. "Then get another one." "Claire." He moved. The guard's face changed. 20 minutes later, Dr. Samuel Reyes arrived through a service entrance. He had previously treated Bellini soldiers and knew better than to ask questions. He placed a stethoscope against Dante's chest. Listened. Moved it. Listened again. Then looked at Claire. How long was he declared dead? Almost 3 hours. He isn't dead. Claire gripped the edge of the bed. Reyes immediately began examining medications left on the surgical tray. His expression darkened. "What?" "This sedative." He raised a vial. "It shouldn't look cloudy." Claire stared. Reyes drew a sample. "Some synthetic compounds can suppress cardiac activity until a pulse becomes nearly impossible to detect, combined with blood loss and hypothermia. Someone poisoned him?" Reyes didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "Someone wanted anyone checking him to believe his heart had stopped." Claire felt cold spread through her. Does Dr. Monroe know? I don't know. Can you save him? Reyes looked at Dante. If we warm him slowly, support respiration, control the toxin. He turned toward Claire. But nobody can know yet. She understood instantly. If someone inside the mansion had poisoned Dante during surgery, announcing his survival could finish the assassination. Who do we trust? A weak voice answered from the bed. No one. Claire turned. Dante's eyes were barely open, but he was conscious. She moved beside him. Don't try to speak. His gaze traveled from Reyes to Claire, then down to where she was still holding his hand. His voice was almost nothing. You stayed. Claire swallowed. Yes. His eyes closed. Why? She almost laughed through her tears. Apparently, I'm terrible at following death certificates. Something like amusement passed across his exhausted face. Then he lost consciousness again. Reyes worked for the next 90 minutes. Claire heated blankets, adjusted oxygen lines, held Dante upright while Reyes checked his lungs. Every few minutes, she looked toward the door. At 4:41, footsteps approached. Marco. Claire knew before he entered. Reyes disappeared behind an adjoining supply room door with instructions to contact the few men Dante had named during moments of consciousness. Claire remained beside the bed. Marco entered. You're still here? Then came the moment that would later become legend inside the Bellini organization. Marco ordered the body moved. Claire refused. Dante's fingers tightened around hers. Marco reached beneath his jacket, and Dante opened his eyes. Marco's gun had barely cleared the fabric before Claire reacted. The steel instrument tray beside her crashed into Marco's arm. The gun fired. The bullet shattered a cabinet. Marco struck Claire hard enough to send her into the wall. Dante tried to move and nearly tore his IV free. The door burst open. 3 men came through with weapons raised. Antonio Russo, Dante's oldest bodyguard, saw Marco's gun. Drop it. Marco turned. Claire saw his decision. He wasn't surrendering. She kicked the fallen weapon beneath Dante's bed. Antonio slammed Marco against the wall. 2 guards dragged him down. Dante watched from the bed. His voice was broken but unmistakably cold. Alive. Antonio froze. Boss. Keep him alive. Marco looked toward Dante. For the first time, the underboss appeared afraid. Dante's eyes shifted to Claire. A red mark was already forming along her cheek where Marco had struck her. Something in Dante's expression became far more frightening than anger. Get him out. The mansion learned Dante was alive 40 minutes later. Nobody celebrated. Men simply began reconsidering every decision they had made after 12:16 a.m. Dante remained confined to the medical wing for 17 days. The toxin had nearly killed him. The gunshots had done almost as much damage. Claire expected life to return to normal after the first week. It didn't. Dante requested her, constantly. At first, he disguised it as practicality. Claire knows which medication was given. Claire remembers who entered. Claire was present. Then the excuses became thinner. One evening she entered carrying tea and found him standing beside the window despite strict instructions not to. You're supposed to be in bed. Dante looked over his shoulder. You're becoming very comfortable giving orders. You're becoming very comfortable ignoring doctors. She set down the tray. Sit. A silence passed. Men had died for speaking to him with less confidence. Dante sat. Claire poured tea. You're staring. I am. Why? I haven't decided. Decided what? What kind of woman sits alone holding the hand of a man everyone else believes is dead? Claire met his gaze. The kind who didn't want him to die alone. His expression changed. Only slightly. It was enough. You should fear me. I do. That seemed to surprise him. Claire handed him the cup. But fear isn't the only thing I feel. Dante's fingers brushed hers. Neither moved. What else? She looked at him. You protected me once when there was nothing in it for you. His jaw tightened. That was months ago. Kindness doesn't expire because the person receiving it is inconvenient. I am not kind, Claire. No. Her voice softened. But sometimes you choose to be. For once, Dante Bellini had no answer. The investigation into Marco uncovered something worse than betrayal. Marco had spent 18 months moving money through shell corporations. He had bribed 2 guards, a transportation coordinator, and someone inside Dante's medical staff. Dr. Monroe hadn't deliberately killed Dante. His surgical medication had been switched. But Marco knew exactly what toxin had been used, and someone else had helped him. 3 nights after Marco's arrest, Claire woke to breaking glass. Dante had ordered her moved from the servants' floor into the mansion's main wing. She hated it. The bedroom was larger than her old apartment. There was a guard outside. She felt less like an employee and more like evidence. Then a suppressed gunshot cracked through the corridor. Claire rolled from the bed. The door opened. A masked man entered. Before Claire could scream, someone hit him from behind. Then, he was supposed to be recovering. Instead, he stood in the doorway barefoot, wearing black trousers and a half-buttoned shirt, one hand pressed against his healing ribs. The attacker turned. Dante shot him once. The man dropped. Claire stared. Dante looked at her. Are you hurt? No. He crossed the room anyway. His hands caught her shoulders, checked her face, her arms, her ribs. Dante. His breathing was rough. You shouldn't be here. This is my house. You shouldn't be out of bed. His eyes flashed. Someone entered your room with a gun, and you're concerned about my stitches? Yes. Why? Because apparently neither of us has survival instincts. For 1 second, they simply stared at each other. Then Dante lifted his hand, almost touched her face, stopped. His fingers curled. Go to another room. Why? Because if I stay here, I am going to forget that you work for me. Claire's pulse changed. Maybe that's not the reason you're stopping. His eyes darkened. Claire, you keep telling me to fear you whenever you're the one who's afraid. Silence. Dangerous silence. Dante stepped closer. What do you think I fear? Wanting something you can't control. He stared at her mouth, then walked away. That was the beginning of the denial. Dante became colder afterward. More formal. Claire found it infuriating. At breakfast, he barely looked at her. During security meetings, he ordered guards to accompany her everywhere. When she objected, he dismissed her objections. You don't own me. No. Then stop behaving like you do. His gaze lifted. If I owned you, Claire, you wouldn't be allowed outside this house at all. That isn't romantic. I wasn't trying to be romantic. She folded her arms. Good. His eyes dropped to her crossed arms. Why does that sound like disappointment? She left before answering. Then came jealousy. Antonio volunteered to drive Claire into the city so she could retrieve belongings from her apartment. Antonio was handsome, 36, unmarried, and one of the only Bellini men Claire considered normal. He made her laugh in the car. When they returned, Dante was standing beneath the mansion's stone entrance. Waiting, Antonio stepped out. You need something, boss. Dante ignored him. His attention stayed on Claire. You were gone 3 hours. The city still has traffic. You didn't answer my message. My phone died. Antonio smiled. She also insisted on stopping for coffee. Dante's gaze shifted slowly toward him. Antonio stopped smiling. That evening, Claire found Dante alone in the library. You terrified Antonio. He'll recover. Were you jealous? No. You are a terrible liar. Dante closed the folder he was reading. Do you want him? Claire blinked. What? Antonio. That's none of your business. It becomes my business when he looks at you like that. She stared. And how exactly does he look at me? Dante stood. Claire's breath caught. He approached until only inches remained between them. Like he's imagining what your hair looks like spread across his pillow. Heat rose beneath her skin. Maybe he's not the one imagining it. The words escaped before she could stop them. Dante became perfectly still. Claire should have stepped away. She didn't. His hand lifted. This time, his knuckles touched her cheek. Barely. Tell me to stop, she whispered. I didn't ask you to start. His thumb traced beneath her jaw. Then he kissed her. Not gently, not cruelly, like a man who had denied hunger until hunger became pain. Claire gripped the front of his shirt. For several breathless seconds, the world outside the library disappeared. Then Dante tore himself away. His forehead touched hers. This is a mistake. Claire's heart tightened. Then don't do it again. She walked out. He did not follow. The next morning, Claire learned someone had released information to the press claiming Dante Bellini was mentally impaired after his near-death experience. Federal investigators began asking questions. Rival families started testing Bellini territory. Marco's betrayal hadn't ended with Marco. It had opened a door, and someone was still feeding information outside. Dante vanished into work. He became the cold Mafia Boss again. Claire watched distance replace everything that had happened in the library. Then she discovered why. A hidden camera had been found inside the hallway outside her bedroom. Someone had recorded Dante entering that night. Someone knew she mattered to him. Claire had become leverage. Dante ordered an armored convoy prepared. "You're leaving Chicago." Claire stared at him across his office. "No, this is not a negotiation." "Then you're having the wrong conversation." His jaw hardened. "There is a safe house in Maine." "I don't care." "You should. You kissed me and decided that gave you the right to exile me." His eyes flashed. "I kissed you and gave my enemies a reason to put a bullet through your skull." There it was. Fear, not anger. Claire softened. "Don't you?" "No." His voice dropped. "I know what men like Marco do with weakness. So I'm weakness." He walked toward her. "No." He stopped close. "You are the first thing in years that has made survival feel insufficient." Claire's breath caught. He looked furious at himself for saying it, then added quietly, "That makes you dangerous to me." She reached for his hand. He pulled away. "If you stay, someone will use you. Then teach me how not to be used." Dante stared. "I don't need you to make my decisions for me. You don't understand what you're asking." "I understand exactly." She stepped closer. "You died, Dante." His face changed. "For 3 hours, everyone in this house started dividing your life between them. I sat beside you because I couldn't leave. Don't punish me now because you finally realized I matter." Silence stretched. Then Dante touched her face. "You matter too much." That was the confession he could manage. For now, Claire remained. 2 days later, they discovered the final traitor, Victor Coletti. The lieutenant Dante had forced to apologize months earlier. Victor had resented Claire ever since. More importantly, he had been Marco's link to mansion security. The hidden camera was his. The assassination route had been his, and he escaped before Dante could arrest him. Victor kidnapped Claire outside the mansion gates the following evening. The attack lasted 17 seconds. A delivery truck blocked the armored vehicle. Smoke grenades exploded. Claire was dragged through a side door before guards could recover. When she woke, she was inside an abandoned church on the industrial edge of Chicago. Rain hammered, stained glass windows. Victor stood near the altar. "You caused all of this." Claire's hands were tied. "No, your ego did." He slapped her. She tasted blood. Victor smiled. "Still talking?" "You always hated that servants could see what you really were." His expression hardened. "He chose you." Claire said nothing. "That man humiliated me for you. A maid. You were humiliated because you were wrong." Victor grabbed her jaw. "You think Bellini loves you?" Claire looked directly into his eyes. "I think you're terrified that he might." Headlights flooded the church windows. Victor froze. Outside, engines surrounded the building. Black SUVs. One after another. Victor laughed nervously. "You think he'll risk a war for you?" The church doors opened. Dante Bellini entered alone. Rain covered his black coat. He wasn't carrying a visible weapon. Victor dragged Claire upright and pressed a gun against her ribs. Dante stopped. His expression was empty. That emptiness frightened Claire more than rage would have. "Let her go." Victor smiled. "You always said emotion makes men stupid." "I was wrong." Dante's gaze moved to Claire. "Are you hurt?" "A little." His jaw flexed. Victor pushed the gun harder against her. "She isn't worth your empire." Dante looked at him. "You misunderstand." His voice remained quiet. "The empire is the thing that isn't worth her." Claire stopped breathing. Victor did too. For half a second, that was enough. Claire drove her heel down onto Victor's foot and threw herself sideways. Gunfire exploded. Dante moved first. Victor fired. The bullet struck Dante high in the shoulder. Dante didn't fall. He crossed the distance and hit Victor so violently both men crashed against the church pews. Claire screamed his name. Bellini soldiers poured through the doors. Antonio pulled Claire away. Dante had Victor on the floor. His hand closed around Victor's throat. Victor choked. "You couldn't save her last time," he rasped. Dante froze. What? Victor smiled through blood. Ask your precious Claire why her father died. Claire went cold. Dante turned. She knew immediately. This was the final secret. The one she had never told him. My father worked for the Bellinis. Claire whispered. Dante released Victor. Claire's eyes burned. He was an accountant. 20 years ago. Understanding entered Dante's face. Thomas Bennett. Claire nodded. Dante knew the name. Her father had discovered money being stolen from Bellini companies when Dante's father still controlled the family. Thomas Bennett disappeared before he could testify. His death had been called an accident. Claire had taken the job at Bellini Mansion, partly because she wanted answers. She had never expected Dante. Victor laughed. She came into your house looking for evidence. Dante stared at Claire. The betrayal in his face hurt more than anger. Is that true? At first. How long? The first few months. You searched my home. Yes. And you never told me. I stopped. Why? Claire's voice broke. Because I realized you weren't your father. Dante said nothing. Victor reached toward a fallen gun. Antonio shot him before he touched it. The church became silent. Dante looked down at Victor's body. Then at Claire. Take her home. Claire stepped toward him. You're bleeding. Antonio. Dante. Take her home. The distance in his voice was worse than hatred. For 3 days, Dante refused to see her. He recovered from the shoulder wound in another wing of the mansion. Claire packed her belongings. She had lied to him, not about staying beside his body, not about loving him, but about why she had entered his world. On the 4th morning, she placed a resignation letter on his desk. Then she walked toward the front doors. Where are you going? Dante's voice came from behind her. Claire stopped. He stood at the top of the staircase. His arm was in a sling. He looked exhausted, powerful, unreachable. I resigned. I didn't accept it. You don't have to. Yes, Claire. I do. She faced him. I lied to you. You omitted something. That's a generous interpretation. Dante descended the stairs. You came here, looking for information about your father. Yes. Did you find it? No. I did. Claire stared. He held a folder. Dante crossed the foyer and handed it to her. Inside were financial records, names, payments, a photograph of Thomas Bennett, and a signed order from Dante's father authorizing Victor's older brother to silence him. Claire's knees nearly gave way. Dante caught her. For several seconds, she cried against the chest of the man whose family had destroyed hers. Dante didn't speak. He simply held her. When she finally pulled away, his eyes were wet. It shocked her more than anything. My father killed yours, he said. You didn't. The empire you saved me for was built partly by men who did. Then change it. Dante looked at her. Claire placed the folder against his chest. That's what separates you from him. His voice became rough. You still believe there is something worth saving in me. I stayed beside your dead body for 3 hours. A broken laugh escaped him. I think we've established that my judgment regarding you is questionable. His hand touched her cheek. Claire closed her eyes. I tried to send you away because I thought distance would make this controllable. And? It didn't. He stepped closer. I tried ignoring you. She smiled faintly. You were terrible at it. I considered firing Antonio. She laughed through tears. I knew it. Dante's expression softened, then became serious again. I don't know how to love someone gently. Claire's smile disappeared. I know. I will worry when you're 10 minutes late. I will put guards where you don't want them. I will want names when someone hurts you. I will probably imagine murder over things reasonable men resolve with conversation. That sounds exhausting. It will be. She looked into his eyes. But you will listen when I say no. Dante paused. Yes. You will not turn protection into a prison. Another pause. Yes. You will remember I am not something you own. His hand slipped around hers. No. Claire raised an eyebrow. Dante brought her fingers to his lips. You are the only person in this house who owns any part of me. Months later, winter settled over Chicago. The Bellini mansion changed. Not completely. Men still arrived in black cars after midnight. Guns still disappeared beneath tailored jackets. Dante Bellini was still feared across the city. But the corrupt accounts were dismantled. Families harmed by his father's organization quietly received restitution through legitimate foundations. Thomas Bennett's name was cleared, and Claire no longer lived on the servants' floor. She didn't become decorative. She refused. Instead, Dante placed her in charge of the mansion's legitimate charitable trust because she had a talent for numbers and an irritating habit of questioning every suspicious expense. One snowy evening, Claire found Dante standing alone on the terrace. Chicago lights glittered beyond the walls. "You'll freeze." He turned. "You came outside." That wasn't permission to ignore the temperature. She wrapped a scarf around his neck. Dante watched her. "What?" "Nothing." "You're staring again." "I am." "Have you decided what kind of woman holds the hand of a dead mafia boss?" He pulled her closer. "Yes." Claire looked up. "And?" "The kind of woman a man would be a fool to lose twice." Snow gathered in Dante's dark hair. Claire smiled. His hand slid around her waist. "I was declared dead at 12, 16 inches the morning," he said quietly. "I remember. My captains abandoned the room. I remember. My closest friend tried to inherit everything I owned. I definitely remember." Dante took her hand, turned it palm upward, then placed it against his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath her fingers. "You were the only person who stayed." Claire looked at him. "You were still alive. No one knew that." "I did." His gaze softened. "No, you believed I was dead too." Claire went still. Dante covered her hand with his. "And you stayed anyway." The truth settled between them. The night she had refused to release his hand had not saved Dante only because she discovered his pulse. It had saved something in him long before his heart began beating strongly again. A man surrounded by hundreds of loyal soldiers had learned that loyalty given to power disappeared quickly. A woman with no power at all had remained when there was nothing left to gain. Dante leaned down. His forehead touched hers. "I spent my entire life making sure no one could become necessary." Claire whispered, "How did that work out?" "Terribly." She smiled. He kissed her beneath the falling snow. Slowly this time. No violence. No fear. No denial. When they separated, Dante kept her hand against his heart. Inside the mansion, armed men waited for orders. Across Chicago, rivals still whispered his name carefully. The Bellini empire remained dangerous. Dante Bellini remained dangerous. But there was one person who could walk into his office without knocking. One person who could tell him he was wrong. One person whose footsteps he recognized from the opposite end of the mansion. And whenever Claire's fingers found his, the most feared man in Chicago remembered the night the entire world had declared him dead. Everyone had let him go, except her. And Dante Bellini had decided long ago that if death ever came for him again, it would have to fight Claire Bennett first.